Ladies and gentlemen, before we go any further with this episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast, we're not going to promote any brand or ask for any sponsorship here on this episode. We are purely going to dedicate this episode to the late Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It's been a very, very difficult time for a lot of people, so I thought it was only right that, yes, we continued to release this week's episode, however, dedicate this episode to Her Majesty the Queen. So on that note, thank you very much, Mom, for everything.
So I struggled with a few injuries. I had a stressy in my back, stressy in my hips, a couple of operations. So for the last few years, it's been quite tough. But I think to be at a club like Surrey, you have to have a belief and a faith in yourself. It's tough on the mind, it's tough on the body. You got to love what you do and you've got to be fully involved in it.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast. I am amazingly joined by another professional cricketer, Conor McKerr. Con, thanks for coming on.
Absolute pleasure.
No worries, mate. So I don't tell anyone this, mate, and I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes just yet. I've got a little icebreaker question for you. So on your Instagram, mate, I did a little bit of diving. Sounds a bit bizarre. And saw on your day in the life video that you like to use the old Boris bikes quite a bit. But if I were to limit you down to just one mode of transport for the rest of your life, what you got to use? Considering now, obviously, you've welcomed a little one into the world now, so you got to consider that as well.
Yeah, well, I'd have to say our car. I mean, we moved out of London, so definitely gone on bikes, but out in Surrey, you need a car.
Fair enough. Cool. So
Yes.
Obviously everyone wondering a bit about yourself, Con. Obviously, professional cricketer for Surrey, and have been now since 2017 or 2016, was it?
Yeah.
So whoever obviously doesn't know you too well, do you mind just giving them a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. South African born. Most of my family was from Scotland, so fortunately I have a British passport. I went to a really good school in Johannesburg called St. John's College, and through there had the opportunity to play provincial cricket. And then in my under 16 year of school, I made the SA under 19 side, and was fortunate enough to go on a few tours with that team. And then nearing the end of my school career, I needed to make a decision. I wanted to follow my dream and be a professional cricketer. And at the time, the best that to happen was to come to England. So I was set up with an agent at the time who knew Alex Stewart, and all things went pretty well. He sent out the bowling coach at the time at Surrey, who was Stuart Barnes, and we had our under-19 World Cup in Bangladesh. And he saw me bowl a few times. We had a couple of good conversations, and just after that World Cup, I got offered a contract to play for Surrey. It all went. So that was me at 18, actually at 17 at the time, and then I moved to London when I was 18 to start my career.
Brilliant. How hard was that decision then, deciding to come over from South Africa? Because obviously, like you said, you had the British passport, you got your family over in Scotland. So, but how hard was that decision actually trying to make it over here? Obviously, leaving friends and family, I think everyone can sort of agree that's probably a difficult decision, no?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, to this day, my whole family actually still live in South Africa. I've only got extended family in Scotland. So yeah, the hardest thing was leaving family. But I knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to be a professional sportsman. And I think the decision was kind of made for me when I was 16 and I made the under-19 SA team. So it was just full push, and I knew in my heart I would do whatever it took to be a professional cricketer. And one of those things was leaving South Africa and coming to England.
Do you think
at the end, it was tough, but what I needed to do.
Yeah. Do you think it takes that certain type of cricketer or certain type of athlete to be able to have that mindset then, do you reckon? Just having sort of a do it all at all costs kind of mentality? Because I think obviously there's a big difference between actually saying it and doing it. and I think
Yeah.
you've obviously done it more on some. So do you think it takes a certain type of person?
I think anyone can have it. It's just you need to have the right drive. You need to be doing it for the right reasons. I think if you're pushing yourself, I think anybody can do it. I just think that you need to be doing it for the right reasons, and it'll push you over the edge.
Especially making such a big move, hasn't it? You got to make sure obviously everything falls into the right places and things like that. So was it a case of, did you look up to Surrey then? Because I think everyone who follows cricket knows how big of a club Surrey are. You know, massive players. So it was the Curran brothers. You know, obviously everyone who's played in the past. You know, Chris Jordan. Oh, sorry, still playing Chris. Was it quite an easy decision then when Surrey came sort of knocking for you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, around the world, Surrey is known as probably the biggest county, biggest club in the world. So yeah, it was actually a no-brainer. I think I got offered the contract and had signed it within a week, really. So yeah, coming to Surrey was just the icing on the cake, but it was a no-brainer for me.
Brilliant. In terms of sort of obviously, if anyone doesn't know, Con's obviously a fast bowler. Obviously, incredible for me because obviously I'm a bowler as well. And actually, I say bowler, but obviously on the day we're filming this, Con actually hit the winning runs yesterday, so I'm going to call him T20 finisher as well. So I'm going to give him that accolade as well. That was a brilliant strike to finish off, to be fair. And obviously got the qualification towards the next round of the T20 Blast, which is brilliant. So if looking on your Surrey career, because obviously I've looked up to you for a little bit, considering obviously I'm fortunate to go through a couple of injuries, and obviously you've been out on loan, which I'm really excited to get into, sort of the mental side of that. Sort of coming to a place like Surrey, did you think that it would be quite tough to get into the side straight away? And did you know that obviously I think you knew it was going to take a lot of hard work because you got that mindset straight away. But did you know that obviously it was going to be probably a little bit harder than it was?
I was pretty optimistic when I first came to Surrey. I had quite a lot of faith in my own skill and my own ability. So when I came here as an 18-year-old, I was pretty confident that I'd be in the team as soon as I could get fully fit. And that actually turned out to be true. For the first bit of my career, when I was fit, I was playing. So I struggled with a few injuries. I had a stressy in my back, stressy in my hips, a couple of operations. So for the last few years, it's been quite tough. But I think to be at a club like Surrey, you have to have a belief and a faith in yourself. You have to be able to trust yourself to be on the same level as the Chris Jordans and Jason Roys and the Curran brothers. You've got to be on their level, otherwise you're not going to play. And that's the mentality I think everyone has to have. So yeah, for the first couple of years, 16 I was injured, 17 I played a handful, and then the year that we won the championship in 2018, I played quite a lot. So yeah, I knew it was going to be tough, but I have the faith in my own ability to be at the top level.
Well, I can't remember the exact quote now, but I think I saw it the other day. It was something like, if you don't have that self-belief, it makes your job 10 times harder, doesn't it, at the end of the day? Because everyone who works hard and they don't have that belief there, well, it's kind of, you don't have a purpose driving you forward, no, to a certain extent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So exactly. What happened then? Obviously, with the loan, this is a really, really interesting thing, because obviously we all saw you went out on loan and did quite well in that T20 Blast. Was that a case of, for you, just coming back from injury and understanding that you got to get some game time under your belt?
Well, I've been on loan twice now with Derby.
Yeah.
The first 2017, and that was a case of, the way that I understood it was that I was too good to be playing second team cricket, but the ones at Surrey were too good. So I needed to bridge the gap. I needed to be playing. And I'd just turned 9. Actually, I was still 18 at the time. And I needed to be playing first class cricket. So that was the decision made by our directors and coaches that said, I need to be playing first class cricket. So that was an amazing opportunity. And that proved the right thing to do, because that went really well. And then the T20s last year, probably quite similar, actually. I was doing very well in the build up to the T20 campaign. But Surrey's T20 side is full of superstars. So to play in that, yeah. I mean, there was a point at the start of the summer where there was one man on the team sheet not internationally capped. So it was similar last year, and that I had the opportunity to go and play and experience T20 cricket at the high level and play around the country in all the big stadiums up north. So that was more of an experience thing rather than a coming back from injury.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way of looking at it. So I think everyone sees, who is a fan of football, sees the loan sort of market as a very sort of not lucrative, that's probably the wrong way of saying it, but a very sort of black and white thing where people go out on loan because possibly they're not wanted or anything like that. But in a way, I think it's really good for the youngsters, especially you said when you're with your first loan, isn't it? Like you said, just go out and play cricket, or play football, get experience, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. The loan system here is very good. It's an opportunity, especially with the teams with big squads, for guys to get experience playing at the high level, to be playing in front of crowds, to be playing in stadiums. You need that experience so that in moments of high pressure, you're not doing it for the first time. You've got a little bit of experience and a bit of composure behind you.
Was it a bit daunting then, sort of being at Surrey for so long and then going out on loan? Did it ever sort of cross your mind for that first loan? Obviously, that second one, I can imagine it was pretty easy knowing that you had been there before, etc. But did you obviously have a bit of hesitation at first, or did that sort of promise a game time almost sort of make it a little bit easier for you?
Yeah, well, at the time, that was my first class debut. So there was no hesitation, really. There was an opportunity to play, and it was actually at Trent Bridge, which is an incredible stadium. So I was just lucky. I was like, right place, right time, and I'll take the opportunity where it comes.
That's brilliant. In terms of then, we mentioned the injuries a little bit beforehand, and obviously myself nowhere near. But can you sort of talk to us a little bit about the couple of injuries that you had recently? Obviously, the one just before the current block of T20s, where it's obviously out for a little bit and it's taken you a bit to build up. Do you mind just having a chat with us about that? That's all right.
Yeah, sure. This year was probably the most frustrating. In the past, it's been like stress injuries, stress fractures, stuff like that. Whereas this was quite a freak injury. So I broke 2 ribs just fielding. And it was actually the last day of the warm-up games for the season.
Oh, dear.
So it was like perfect bad timing, the perfect wrong time to get injured. And that was tough to take mentally. I think for about a week and a half, I was pretty low. That was difficult because it was such a good winter, such a good preseason. Had a very good chance of playing in those first games. So that was quite tough. That it's like half a season got taken away without me actually doing anything wrong or nothing, like just a freak injury. So fortunately, I was able to get away. And that was probably the biggest thing that helped. I was able to get away with my missus, and we spent a weekend away, and just to switch off, get my head out of it, so that I can come back fresh, ready to go, ready to get back on the rehab train, because that can be quite a lonely place sometimes.
Yeah, well, you say, look, obviously you got sort of one of my sort of the lads I look up to. Obviously, TC's there with you, isn't it? Tom Curran. So you got does it help obviously when obviously it's unfortunate because never want to see obviously your mates and your teammates go through injury, but does it help almost having someone there in a similar position or someone who's there to support you all the way? I had an Irene Donald from Hampshire on the podcast recently, and he kind of said that having sort of his physio there all the time kind of almost helped him get through it in a way. Is that something that you sort of are quite sort of big on?
Yeah, I think having the right support structure around you is huge. This injury, for example, I had my missus at home. We've got quite a good medical staff at Surrey. There were 1 or 2 of the boys going through the same thing. So this one was good. I think the biggest thing is making sure you've got the right support around you. Mentally, that it's quite crucial to have that.
Yeah, that's, I suppose it almost gives you a bit of a distraction, isn't it? Because I was always saying with your missus, when you get home, you can obviously switch off from cricket, but then obviously when you're at cricket and you're doing your job, you've got that distraction there, I suppose, no?
Yeah, exactly right. Bit of perspective as well.
Yeah.
So good or bad day, you come home and it's the same. Same solid base is huge for me.
And you mentioned sort of that you were quite low in that stage sort of when you're just going to, obviously it was an absolutely unbelievable thing to sort of consider being injured just before the start of the season. But and you mentioned obviously that mindset perspective. Obviously, Conor, he's obviously partnered with a couple of companies as well. But your partner with is Opening Up, I think it is a charity as well. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I think that was quite a big one for me, because I've had Talking Mental Skills on the podcast, Kieran Carson, Stephen Rango from Glamorgan, and they kind of got into depth about sort of psychology and that side. I think obviously the mental side of the game by itself, obviously how people suffer or sort of deal with things, is quite interesting as well.
Yeah, mental health has been a huge part of my process as a professional cricketer. So I'm linked with Sport in Mind, who do amazing things. They promote the physical activity as part of healing and as part of being active, and promoting that way of helping and healing mental health. And at Opening Up Cricket, they're an organization that hosts talks and just make it a bit more aware. Because I reckon probably 10 years ago, mental health wasn't a thing in cricket. It was a very old-fashioned, very rigid, structured way of thinking. You weren't really allowed to struggle. So these organizations are brilliant just to help people understand that, you know, mental health and mental health struggles are real, and they happen to pretty much everybody. No one goes through life with no anxiety or sadness. Like, that's just part of life. So having that organization behind me is pretty good. Yeah, it's quite special to be a part of, actually.
Yeah, well, you see all the lads who are partnered up with them, and it's quite all sort of support the brand. I think it's partners up's a bit of a weird, bad way of saying it, but obviously support the brand in that sense. How do you deal with, obviously, when things happen? Let's say from a performance side first. I think obviously you mentioned quite quickly sort of that you went away with your missus, and that was obviously a distraction. Is that sort of a case of quite consistently what you do? For example, you have a sort of an off game, or also you don't sort of perform as well as you like. Is that something that you tend to do straight away and to forget about cricket a little bit, or is forgetting out about cricket probably the wrong way of doing it?
I think everyone's different in that aspect. The way I would do it is, especially in performance, if you're performing badly, you need to understand why you're performing badly, understand what's happened in that game. So it's a little bit more analytical. If you're performing badly because it was mis-execution, you can live with that. You know, no one's going to perform or execute 100% every day. If it's performing badly because you're underprepared or you have the wrong plan, that's tough. That's sit down and work. You know, there's no room really in professional cricket anymore to not be prepared, to not understand your plans. So yeah, performance is a bit different. I think you got to be honest. If you're not performing badly, there's a reason, and you got to figure it out.
So from a sort of outside cricket's perspective, and sort of coming on to, I think Dan Douthwaite, again, another cricketer I've had on, kind of mentioned that he kind of splits it into, he has his sort of personal bit and his cricket bit, but he struggles to almost forget about cricket. Are you a similar case?
I used to be really bad at it. I used to keep cricket as a whole. That was me.
Cricket.
But probably in the last year, having a child, getting married, that allows you to have like a life outside of cricket. That allows you to have time and space away from the game. So I completely agree that that's needed. You need that time. You need cricket's a long game. You spend 4 days, 5 days in the field. That is a long time to be out on your feet. So if you're bringing that home with you, there's just no time for you to recover mentally. There's no time for you to switch off. So yeah, the splitting the two worlds basically, I think, is pretty important.
And sort of how does that obviously help you a little bit when you go back to sort of doing sort of your, whether it's in the gym and we'll get into that in a second, or sort of any sort of skill work? Does that help you sort of having that fresh head coming back into a training session, for example, after having a weekend off?
Yeah, absolutely. It can get quite clouded. You know, we spend the county season's nearly 7 months long. That can be a busy time in your head if you have no time to switch off. By August, September, you can be in the bush. So I think having a weekend off here and there, coming back on a Monday or after a break, just allows you to be fresh, clear in your head, and precise in what you're doing day to day.
Is the gaffer quite good with that then, sort of allowing you a couple of days off after a game? Or obviously T20 is a bit different, being so back to back nowadays, but sort of is that something that he's quite good with?
I think the whole coaching staff now is good. And I don't think that's just Surrey. I think the way the world of sports is going is there's such a focus on mental health now that you actually, as an organization, you have to allow for it. You have to allow guys time and space away from the sport to sort their own heads out.
That's brilliant. And in terms of then sort of going back into the gym, because it's something I'm quite interested in. I'm a strength and conditioning coach by trade. Obviously, that's what we revolve ourselves on. Is sort of talk to us a little bit, because I've seen some big numbers on the Instagram, mate, and obviously from the S&C coach side, I follow both of you, obviously. So is that something that's been quite big for you? Obviously, aside from injury, obviously, I think everyone knows, obviously, being physically robust is quite important when to avoid injury, or when injuries strike, to kind of cope with that. Is that something that you sort of enjoy or sort of put a lot of emphasis on as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's quite a tricky one. There needs to be a balance in training for cricket, because I've been guilty of it, on getting too big and too strong, and actually, we've been speaking about it lots. The mental health is a big. Gymming and training is huge for my mental health. Just the physical exertion, the achieving little goals and successes in training is quite an important part of how I like to operate and how I like to keep a calm mental state. So it's quite an interesting one to balance, actually. The training as hard as I can, but while still being lean and fit for cricket. That there's a big difference between like gym fit and cricket fit.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit about balance, isn't it, as well? Like you said, that you went on to before.
Exactly. So it's, I'm still learning. I don't think anyone has got it down to 100%, but the more balance that I can have, where it's not counting every calorie and trying to lift the heaviest squat, for example, there's no balance. That's just all the time, always focused, always on. Whereas now, I still structure my meals very well. I did a pretty good nutrition course during the first lockdown, so I'm pretty consistent with how I'm eating. It's all pretty structured, but it's a lot less strict, more balanced, with calmer, and the training sort of followed suit. Still fit, still strong, but not trying to squat 2.5 body weight, trying to bench press 1.5 body weight. It's just a little bit more balanced.
How did you adapt that then? Because obviously when you first came over to the UK to come and play for Surrey, you kind of had that whatever it takes attitude, and then obviously now you've developed into that sort of balanced mindset where you're very much about sort of sort of balance. Obviously, I think it's a bit different now, obviously, with your missus and your kids. So obviously, it kind of naturally happens. But how did you kind of stop yourself or change that mentality sort of with that? Because obviously you've gone from one end of the spectrum sort of stripped to the other one, haven't you, in a certain way?
Like I said, it's been a long learning process, and then I've got it wrong a few times. I think that's actually what's happened. It's not that I've just learnt in myself that this is how I want to be. I've gone all out. This is me. This is how I train. This is how I eat. And then it's failed, and I've got badly injured, or I've not been good on the field because I'm just wrecked. So I've got it wrong. That's how I've got to where I am now. Over the last few years, the processes that I've been trying to follow fail. So then I sit back and go, wow, okay, we need to adapt, we need to change. And so that's the process. That's how I've got, it's not been smooth at all.
Yeah. And do you reckon that sort of takes a little bit of making mistakes sometimes? I think everyone, and I did a podcast on about it, I think it was a couple of episodes ago, sort of saying how sort of there's a big difference between a failure and a setback, and obviously how sort of injuries are more related to setbacks than obviously, I don't know, something sort of which changes the goal is more related to a failure. Do you reckon that it takes some people making mistakes or having setbacks sometimes to kind of find what works best for them? Because like you said, everyone's individual. So I think you can't have one size fits all in terms of not just for your mental health, but your physical health as well. Something that works for Con might not work for me, and what might work for me might not work for my brother or my cousin or whatever. You didn't know.
Yeah, exactly right. There's no set process. The failing, no one likes to fail, but it's helped me. It really has. At the time, it's the worst thing in the world, but looking back on the times that it has failed and that I've got it wrong, that's actually been so beneficial in the long run. Unfortunately, I was very young when I started, so being 24 now and having a lot of failure actually means that I've got a long way to go, a long time period in my career left where I've got this mindset of being balanced and approaching it in a different way.
That's brilliant. And then, like you said, it took you sort of a long time to sort of find that different change in mentality and linking that a bit more into the skill side. Because I know a lot of my teammates and a lot of my friends who are coaches now are listening and wanting to hear this. So in terms of your skill side, I think I saw a very, very old video of you bowling in when you first got to Surrey and then versus now. How quick are you sort of to change something with your action or change something with your batting style, which will sort of help you longer term, or how sort of disciplined are you to say, no, I'm going to give this a fair shot to see if this actually works?
Yeah, well, I think there's a big distinction between changing technique and changing skill. Skill is developed over years and years and years. And something that's been amazing for me in the last 6 months is having Azza Mahmood as part of our coaching staff. And he's got a huge focus on skill, and the skill of different balls, different seams, different like trajectory, different release points. There's a huge focus for him on the skill of both. Whereas a few coaches that I've had in my past, the only focus is technique. So you need to have a simple, repeatable technique in batting and bowling, but the focus on skill at top level needs to be number one. Technical changes can happen over a winter, over a few months of just being downstairs, being in indoor school, hitting balls, or off a few yards of your run up. You can change technique, but having the full focus on skill and adapting skill, and I think that's the most important. That takes years and years.
And how patient are you with sort of when things probably aren't going right with a certain thing that sort of, like you said, he probably suggests, or with a certain type of coach, it doesn't have to be Saqib, it could be sort of someone else in that sense, who a past coach or someone who you may look up to. Sort of how sort of long do you leave it before you then say, no, this probably isn't working for me, or this actually is, and I'm going to try this in a game or try this in a practice game?
I think it's quite quick, actually. I think you try and get to a point where you understand your body, and you can feel things. So, as an example, Azza came and he's slightly changed the angle of my front arm, and if you do that for an over, and it feels like, okay, that's right, it's releasing well, that feels right, then you have the confidence and to stick with it a bit. Then you can push it and you can go for a few months, see how that's going. But if someone says something to you, you go, yeah, sure, I'll always try it. But if I run up and that's not right, then I'm not going to stick with it at all.
Are you a bit about feel then quite a lot then, sort of whether you're batting or you're bowling?
Definitely bowling. And that's actually been quite a big part of how I've learned and how I've grown as a bowler, because it used to be, I'm not feeling great today, so it's a shit day. But the reality of a bowler, and especially in the county game, is that you very rarely feel 100%, if ever. So you actually have to figure out how to operate probably at 80%.
And how do you then crack on and sort of keep bowling then if you're feeling at that 8%? Because then obviously I think, like you said, it's about feel. So feeling as best you can on game day is probably so important for a bowler or a batter. So then how do you realize, oh, well, I'm not feeling great today, but I'm still going to go out and try my best? Is that the mentality you have, or is it something else that you use?
I think then you've got to just trust your own skill. I think that's when the skill factor comes in, and you've got to have the trust and the faith in yourself that, you know what, I'm not feeling great today, but if I stick to my own process and I stick to my game, I can get out of this day skillfully enough to end the day with a 1 for 50 off your 20 overs or something like that, instead of the 5 for 40, you know.
How do you then deal with sort of when it doesn't go your way in that respect, but you know you've prepared sort of 110% well enough? Is that a case of just sort of, again, giving a batsman a shake and saying good job, or is it a case of knowing that, you know, you're going to get another shot eventually? Because I think there's a big difference between batting and bowling, where you're like, oh well, batsman's got out, you know, he's not got another shot. But I think bowlers have 5 more deliveries or 3 more in the over left to sort of counteract that. Is that something that you look up to quite a bit?
Yeah, well, I think that's execution. If you've got a clear plan, you know what you're trying to do, and you get it wrong, you know, especially in T20 cricket, like that's just
bizarre game, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yesterday was a great example. I bowled a few like average deliveries, play and miss, one bowled, and then I bowled a gun bumper, and he's top edged it for 6. So there's actually execution. Sometimes it's just how the game goes. You can get it wrong, you can get it right. You know, as long as you're sticking to your process and you're clear on what you're trying to do, then, you know, that's it.
And what about before a game? Because this is quite interesting for me, because I almost tend to feel like, not in the case that I need to obviously improve anything, but I feel like I need to get a little bit of volume in quite a bit just before a game, or just the day before a game, to almost feel at my best. What is it for you? Is it a case of similar, or do you feel like almost trusting in that skill, like you said, is good enough for you?
I think we work pretty consistently. There's never huge peaks, huge lows in how we train.
Yeah.
The day before game, it won't be huge volume. But potentially with the bat, I'll hit quite a few balls. But bowling will never be more than 4 overs. It's almost just a groove. Make sure I'm loose. Make sure that I understand my role, how I'm going to bowl the next day, and that's it. It's never going to be a whole long double spell or a big session or anything like that.
And what about your fielding? Because I know for me, fielding is a massive thing for me. Sort of, you have a shit over, or you have a terrible hit with a bat, you know, you can still obviously influence it with the field. And obviously, like you mentioned, sort of previously, obviously that unfortunate injury with when you're fielding. Is fielding a sort of a big part for you?
Yeah, fielding's. I mean, I've always loved fielding. It's just something that I've been fortunate to be quite good at. Got good hands, move quite well, and I mean, I field on the boundary in T20s, so I'm always in the game, always waiting for catches, always moving basically. So fielding's huge, and that's just hard work, really. Yeah. Fielding, anyone can be a good fielder if you're confident and you work hard. Fielding can be good.
Cool. And then what's next for you then, mate? I think it's, before we just go into the last couple of questions, what's next for you then for the next block? Because obviously, you know, you got a next block of the T20, and then it goes into One Day Cup now. Yes,
that's right. So yeah, the next for me is to maintain fitness and get through the season. You know, I'm quite an ambitious cricketer, so we need to make sure that I stay on the field and keep doing what I've been doing. We're going to finish this T20 block. We just qualified, like you said, so we've got the quarterfinals, and hopefully we get to finals day, and that's always good fun. So we get there, and then the squad pretty much splits in half. Half of us will play the One Day Cup, the rest go to the 100. And this is actually awesome. We loved that last year. Yeah, the One Day Cup was cool, man. Traveling around the country, playing good cricket. So yeah, it's quite exciting. And we've still got, I think, 6 Champion games left, 6 or 7. So there's a lot of cricket to be played this summer.
That's brilliant. So then my last couple of points that I like to hit with everyone before, is there sort of one individual, or so maybe a couple, who have sort of influenced you in your career thus far?
Yeah. When I was younger, my school coaches were incredibly influential. A man named Adrian Norris was my first team coach, and I've always looked up to him and always respected him hugely. And then Alex Stewart, while I've been at Surrey, has been amazing. He gave me my first job, so I'll always be thankful for that.
It's quite a nice thing to say, that is obviously he's giving you your first job, and your first job is professional cricket, mate. So you have to. That's pretty cool. So then, the last point, I think, which is probably my favourite question, is sort of what's one piece of advice for anyone who wants to be the next sort of Conor McKerr or the next fast bowler for Surrey?
You got to love what you do. It's tough for the mind, it's tough on the body. You got to love what you do, and you've got to be fully involved in it.
Nice and simple, ladies and gents. Nice and simple. I love it. Con, mate, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been a brilliant insight. I think the fact that I keep having cricketers on is just goes to show how brilliant you guys are, sort of on and off the field. So thanks very much for coming on. Cheers, mate.
Pleasure.
No worries, guys. Thanks for listening as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to that episode of the Fitzness Podcast. I'm going to be honest, it was a really, really difficult time to release this episode with everything going on right now with the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. However, I thought it was right that we continued and we didn't stop, but obviously dedicated this episode to her, like I said at the beginning of the episode. But obviously this episode was an unbelievable one to record and talk to Con about everything that's gone on so far. You know, he's had a difficult journey. You know, he's only still only 26, but he's an unbelievable bloke. He gave me his time when he didn't have to. So I really appreciate Con if you're listening. And obviously, we're getting more cricketers on team. Obviously, I know a lot of you may not be cricket fans. However, you're learning. Hopefully, fingers crossed from all the professional cricketers. You know, I think everyone looks at football a hell of a lot, but doesn't understand that professional cricketers have a lot to offer and a lot of good advice to put across. So thank you very much, Con. Again, if you are listening, mates, I really, really appreciate your time. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast team. And I'll see you again next Sunday for another episode. Take care.